All right, welcome so much to the event tonight for Credit and Debt Workshop. This is really a time for us to just kind of get into a little bit of detail on how credit works and how to set you up for success, whether you're rebuilding credit or you're establishing credit for the first time. This is going to be a 101, so we're not going to dive into your personal situation right here. However, I certainly can help at some level with this if you'd like to. I am not a credit repair person, but I know enough just from the time that I've spent working in the mortgage industry to be able to help people understand kind of what's going on with credit and sometimes how to get them set up for success. This is a part of our Financial Freedom Workshop series. We do have a variety more of these, and we'll talk more about these financial freedom workshops later on, as we do have a full series to kind of set us up. The first thing for the evening that we're going to talk about is we're going to just introduce the topics, and there's really two main pieces to tonight's conversation. These pieces to tonight's conversation are really, we're going to talk about the 5 credit factors, and really then after that, kind of how to manage credit, and then how to set yourself up for success. The real reason I kind of got started in this is in mortgages, obviously, we deal with credit at a very high level, and we're helping people establish and build up their credit sometimes in order to be able to get either better terms or to be able to set themselves apart. But what I found is that credit is certainly not intuitive. In fact, there are plenty of places here that you're going to find that things don't always make sense, especially from the standpoint of how they look at it. But that doesn't mean that we can't understand it and that we can't conquer the algorithms that are associated with it. So because this isn't there, we're going to just decide to go in on it and go in pretty deep. Now, the big thing I want to just go ahead and get started with is just a real quick introduction to myself and what I do. I'm in mortgages currently, but I haven't always been in mortgages. I actually started off in construction. I went to school from college. I got into construction. And pretty much what happened was I eventually found my way into the mortgage industry, kind of by accident, but that's the way it happened. Before getting into mortgage, I was the director of sales for a regional builder. I actually was a contractor myself. I built and remodeled homes. I started out actually as a mobile home repairman, so that's quite a bit. And then on the personal side, I'm married. I have 4 wonderful kids, and I don't consider myself the dog father, but I do have a very sassy dog, and you can kind of see her right there in the picture. She's Lucy, and she's a golden retriever that has more personality than anything else. So anyway, getting on to the next one that we want to do is starting off with credit. With credit, you really need to know what you're up against. And sometimes it's really one of those things that you have to understand and take the bull by the horns and go ahead and start trying to find a way to manage your own credit. I know there are plenty of places out there that can help you manage credit. There are plenty of places out there that can give you tips and tricks on it. Some places want you to pay for it. There are some free things, but there's nothing in credit that you can't do for yourself. So the first thing I would suggest you do is if you have trouble with credit, or you're considering credit, or you're trying to rebuild your credit, I would actually encourage you to go to this website that you see right here, annualcreditreport.com, and you can actually pull a free credit report right from this website. Now, the reason why this is actually a really good idea to do this is because everybody's heard of a Google rating. And I'm sure some of you have left Google ratings before. I know that I ask my clients to give me Google ratings. And so, the Google rating is kind of like somebody else's opinion of how I've done business and how I work and how I do things. Well, credit, in essence, is actually the same thing. Credit is what they're doing is they're doing a synopsis of what it is that you're doing with your credit, and they're giving you a rating based off of that. Now, they don't do it in stars like we do in Google, but they do give you a very good idea of what it is that you're buying, or how you're going to get your terms based off of what you're getting right there with your credit. So you have to think in terms of trying to figure out how to create your credit score and help you build that back up. And just so you don't think that this is totally harsh, in China, they actually have a social credit score too. That is kind of crazy, but you can't even travel if you don't have a credit score or a social credit score in a certain way. Now, these are all pretty important things to do, but what you need to know with your credit score, and this is the overarching theme and terms that you need to be coming to grips with, is that banks use this to help understand how to extend credit to you. And for them, it's all about risk reward. And here's what that means is if they feel like they're risking their money by putting it on you or giving you the money necessary to be able to buy a house, they're going to ask for more reward from you, which means the terms are not going to be necessarily as good and the interest rates are going to be significantly worse for people who don't have a good credit score. Now, another thing that you need to know with this is as you get into credit, credit kind of works. I like talking about it in Instapot and Crockpot kind of scenarios. When you make a decision that is poor and you have a credit problem, it's kind of like an Instapot. It goes down really fast. It cooks, everybody is using the Instapots nowadays. It's cooking extremely fast. That's extremely awesome, and you get your food quickly, but the same thing happens with credit. It goes down extremely fast when you have an error. Now, on the converse, if you're trying to raise your score, it's kind of like a crock pot. You can let that thing sit for hours and it will cook, but it's going to take some time to get there. Now, let's just kind of talk about the 5 factors that influence credit. Now, this is the basics of it. We're going to go through each one of these in a little bit more detail. But there are 5 types. And so you can see that the biggest piece of the pie, which is right over here on the right-hand side, is your payment history. So your payment history plays a huge role in it. We're going to talk about what that means in a second. How much you owe plays another big portion. So 65% of your credit score is actually based off of these 2 parameters. Now you can see the length of the credit history is right there as well. That takes you up to about 80% if you add those 3 together. New credit accounts count for more, and the variety of credit that you have also plays into this. I kind of wish this would have been taught in college or high school, or sometimes even at home, because I had no concept of this, and I know my parents didn't have any concept of this either. So unfortunately, what ended up happening with me in my case is I started making poor spending decisions based off what I'd seen in my own family's life. And so that actually took me down the path that made me get to a financial ground zero that I actually had to recover from at some point in time. And so what I'm going to share with you real quick is kind of how to get past that so that you can in turn, start rebuilding your credit or build your credit or establish credit and help set yourself up for an amazing set of terms when you go to buy a car, finance the purchase of a home, or a variety of other things, get credit card terms or anything else that you want to do with this. Now, getting to the next thing, the first piece right here is going to be your payment history. Now, this doesn't really come as too much surprise to people because payment history does play a pretty big role in what you're doing. This means it's just a payment history of your on time and late payments. Now, the key word here is going to be timely. And so that means that if they have a very specific date by which they want you to make these payments by, you need to make these payments on time. And this can be anything from the car, the house, the student loans, credit cards, rent. Yeah, rent does show up on credit. And it is one of those things that they do take a look at. I've seen a lot of people's rent on credit. I've seen people have a disastrous credit score because they didn't pay their rent on time. So those are big things with it. With this piece, some of the people get a misconception. Like I dealt with some international clients who said, well, it's only 25 bucks. It's only 25 bucks. I'll pay it next month. Well, if you miss that timely payment like you're supposed to, it doesn't matter if it's a small amount. It's going to be like an Instapot. It's going to drop your credit like crazy. And the lates on your credit are like really, really bad news, shouted from a megaphone. And so it's almost like when you have a late on your credit card or any other type of credit payment, it's amazing how quickly those things start pervasively going throughout the rest of your credit, and everybody gets to see it to the point to where now if you don't take care of it, what ends up happening is it continues to destroy your credit over time, because it's not like it goes away. It's on your credit report for 8 years. It's going to be on there for a long period of time. And so having an opportunity to understand what that means taking care of your payments on time is a huge deal. Now, the lates, it doesn't mean that we can't find a way to fix these, but it is something that you do need to be aware of, that once it's on there, it's a very difficult thing to overcome. We're going to talk about some strategies with that a little bit. So one of the strategies actually with a credit card, and I've seen people who have had problems with their credit cards and also car payments. Believe it or not, I saw one person that actually consistently made every single one of his 60-month payments for his car 1 month late. because what happened was is he got 1 month behind, and he just went ahead and just kept making that payment 1 month behind as if he was right on time, and he had no idea why he had a very low credit score. It's because the creditor is not responsible for telling him, and he was always 1 month behind. And so that's why the annualcreditreport.com is extremely good, because many times you can go in and take care of these things very quickly if you want and you are able to catch it in time. So if you did have a late on a credit card, let's just say, and that late has really brought your credit down, and it's, once again, it's like a mouse with a megaphone. It is absolutely just screaming, and it is totally destroying your credit by that one credit card. The best way to stop that megaphone, is to pay off the card and actually close it. Now, I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but the sooner you start replacing the bad news with good news, the better off you're going to be, and the quicker you're going to start seeing some recovery. Now, going to the next one right here, how much you owe also plays a huge role in this. And this is 30% of your credit. Now, this is not always intuitive right here. So let's just kind of talk about what that means, because some of it's about the available credit, but some of it's about your credit limit as well. And what I have a lot of people say is, well, I've got 6 credit cards. I've got 7 credit cards, 8 credit cards. I got credit. What do you mean my credit's hurting? Well, the answer is that if you have 6 or 7 credits, you have a whole lot of opportunity to be able to push your credit limit up and use the available credit. And I have people that use 75, 85, 95% of this credit. And that really hurts. This is especially with credit cards, because credit cards are a little bit different than some of the other loans. For example, if you have a car loan, the car loan is just something that is going to be regular and predictable. If you make that payment on time with a car loan, it's an installment loan. At some point in time, it's going to be done. A credit card is very different. A credit card you can add money to, and you can take money away. You can add money to, and you can pay it off and be able to use it again. So your credit limit, or your available credit, and the credit limit play a huge role factor in this. And so let's just say that on your credit card, you are running right now, you have a $2,000 disposable balance on your credit card. But with your credit card, in essence, there's a 50% rule, there's a 30% rule, and there's a 10% rule. And so here's what that means. If your available limit, or your credit limit on that credit card, is $2,000, and you've used $1,900 of that $2,000 credit limit, in essence, you're about 99% used up on that card. That is actually hurting your credit, because you're over top of the 50% rule. Anytime you're using your credit, and your credit availability and the stuff that you're using is 90 or over 50% of your credit, it is going to drag your credit down. It's going to drag your credit down to the point to where you're not going to be able to improve your credit until you start reducing it down to below 50%. From 50% up use of your credit limit, of the available credit that you have, if you're using over 50% of that credit limit, it hurts your credit. Now, from 50% down to 30%, it's a little neutral. So it doesn't necessarily hurt your credit, but it doesn't necessarily help your credit either. Now, once you get down below 30%, now it starts starting to improve your credit. You're starting to see some momentum, and you're starting to see that move up. Now, what does that mean? Is on a 30% of a 2,000 card, that's in essence, 30%, that's what, about $600, give or take, is right about where you're going to be sitting with that piece. So if you're over 30%, now it's going to start hurting your credit. But here's the magic. This is where you start getting your credit on nitro. Is if you can keep your balances below 10%, now you're starting to really see your credit build, and you're really starting to see your credit start moving up fast. Because it's not about how much you use your credit, it's really about how much you manage your credit. And managing your credit, if you have 5 or 6 credit cards and they're all about 90% use, the view that the bank is going to take is that this person, either 1, doesn't know how to manage credit, or 2, they're in desperate means and they have to use this in order to just stay afloat. Why would I extend them additional credit? So those are big pieces that you have to kind of be looking at. Now, What happens is these last two items that we just talked about, which are the one previous to this, which is your payment history, and your credit, how much you owe, these tend to be the two that actually can get us into the most difficult spots when it comes to credit. In fact, this one right here, how much you owe, tends to be the one that can get us in the most difficulty. And this is where we commonly see most people go into either a Chapter 7 bankruptcy or a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, which is a repayment plan. Now, either one of these bankruptcies, obviously it's a ground zero financially. It's going to ruin your credit for a very long time. From a housing perspective, you're going to have to show that you've recovered and that you're never going back to something like that in case you want to actually make this work. And so understanding the payment rules, the 50% rule, the 30% rule, and the 10% rule is going to be extremely important to you to make sure that you're never going back into a position like that where you can set yourself up for disaster, and making sure that you keep those numbers down there. Now, if you do get into a very difficult spot in ground zero, we can talk about some ways to pay it off and how to get ahead with this. We're going to talk about this a little bit more. There is something called the snowball method, in which you can actually help yourself by paying things off and gain some momentum, and the snowball starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you start pretty soon, you're all paid off. So we're going to talk about some of that as we get into the solution part. But as of right now, just understand that there are three rules when it comes to how much you owe. There's the 50% rule, the 30% rule, and the 10% rule. And keeping your credit limit down and the available credit within those range is pretty important. Now, the length of credit history also plays a huge role in what you're going to be doing with your credit. So, for example, a house is a 30-year mortgage for the most part. Most people use a 30-year mortgage unless you're real aggressive and you want to do a 15-year or 20-year or whatever else that you want to do with that. Now, the thing with credit is the longer your period of credit that you have, the better off it's going to be for you, and the more stable your credit's going to be. Now, that's pretty cool, but keep in mind that if you're young trying to establish credit, you may not have a very long period of time. So an 840 credit score or 850 credit score may not be in the tea leaves for you. It may not be something that you're going to be able to get, but with time, if you consistently do the right things, you will actually be able to build it to that point. Now, some of the things that carry the most weight when it comes to credit is, yes, your car loan. If your car loan and your house loan, those are installment loans. As long as you make those in a timely fashion, it's not going to cause you any problems with your credit. It's just going to be regular, predictable. The previous slide that we talked about with the balances at 30% or 30, 50, or 50, 30, and 10, that plays a huge role when it comes to credit cards. Now, credit cards also play a very huge role in length of credit history. For example, I've had a credit card since 2013, so I've had it for 120 months now. That credit card is carrying the vast majority of the weight of my credit. Now, that's pretty cool, unless I have a late, or unless I miss something, or unless something happens and I miss a payment, or something like that. Now, all of a sudden, we're getting into a very dark place because that's carrying the vast majority of my credit, and that is something that is going to take it down very, very quickly. Now, that card, because it has 120 months, it actually, if I were to open up a new card here pretty shortly, this card would carry more weight than the one I just opened up. But let's talk about that real quick, about opening the cards, because that's part of the length of history. The first 6 months you have a credit card, or you open up a new card, it actually hurts your credit. Not only because of the credit inquiry, but also they don't know how you're going to manage it. And so the first 6 months, usually you get a negative review on your credit. Now, having said that, after the first 6 months, between the first 6 months and the next 12 months, or the first 12 months, so that 6-month period, your credit score is pretty neutral at that point with that credit card. After you get past the full year, then it's going to start building from there. So this is where you start getting into situations of people who don't have credit, who need to establish credit in order to be able to buy a house, which we're going to talk about again in a little bit. But this length of credit history plays a really good piece in this, because understanding that when you open up your credit card, you may get a real quick boost of your credit, but then you're going to start seeing that your credit is going to start moving around a little bit with it. But having said that, the length of the history, the longer you have that credit card, the better it is going to be with that. Now, the bigger issue with this is that once you have a house and you get down towards the end, or you have a car and you get down towards the end, you need to know that once you've paid that off, that credit disappears. It disappears. So if you had an 800 credit score before your car and you pay your car off, guess what's going to happen? Your credit score is going to start dropping. It's going to start dropping, and you're going to have to do something to actually bring it back up. And maybe that's something because all of a sudden you've eliminated one of your trade lines or one of your credits. And that's actually a pretty big deal when it comes to how the credit algorithms work. It doesn't necessarily give you benefit in hindsight unless it's a late, and it gives you the benefit of the late, and it keeps hurting your credit as it goes forward. But with the installment loans, like the cars and the houses, once it's paid off, it's not necessarily giving you a whole lot of benefit going forward because they're cutting that loan off, which we're going to talk about that as a strategy as well when it comes to credit cards. So the length of the history has a lot to play into with this conversation. Not only how long an account's been open, but how long the specific types of accounts have been open. Because an installment loan, like a mortgage, is going to be one of those, especially if you got an interest rate of 2.5% or 3% that we saw in the last couple of years, or if you're at 6.5% or 7% and you're going to refinance in about 6 to 8 years. So those are all parts and pieces of that. And so how long it's been since you last used the accounts is another piece with this, because I have a lot of people say, well, I've got 3 accounts. I don't understand why my credit's at the 600s. Well, when was the last time you used that credit card? You don't have any other credit on your account. When was the last time well, I haven't used that credit card in probably 4 years. Well, there it is. So ghost actually unused credit turns into ghost credit. It starts disappearing little by little. And so even though you may have worked really hard to build your credit over time and your time is supporting your credit, if you don't use the credit, it turns into ghost credit. And so it's pretty important that you make sure that you continue to use this, even if it's only $10 to $15 to $20 a month. And that's what I recommend to people who are getting ready to start credit, is to do something like that of that nature. Lates on the credit card take a long time in order for you to eliminate those. And so what I highly encourage you to do is, if you do have lates on your credit card that you've been nursing along with any credit card that you have, and it doesn't matter if you've had it for 10 years, it doesn't matter if you've had it for 10 months, it doesn't really matter. Once you have bad news on a credit card, it's really hard to get over that unless you actually pay off the account and actually close the account. And so it's probably not a bad idea to consider doing that, and maybe just opening up something else that you're committed to make sure that you're never going back to that place where you had that, because then that'll help you rebuild and build good news at the same time as you're rebuilding your credit. Now, new credit plays 10%. And so this is actually a pretty important conversation, especially for those who are looking to establish credit, because when you get that initial credit pull, you're going to be getting hit pretty hard with that credit pull, but you have to have some form of credit to be able to establish with people what it is that you are capable of managing. And so applying for some version of credit isn't pretty important, but most of the time what we're going to find is that it's actually a little difficult for somebody who's never had any credit or has poor credit to actually get a credit card. And so if you look at the top right-hand corner here, you can see get a secured card or build for a credit builder loan. These are opportunities to help people who are rebuilding or starting credit to actually help get set up to be able to buy to build your credit up. So a secured credit card, what that is if you were to go into a secured credit card, you would in essence be going into like Wells Fargo or Bank of America or one of these other banks around here, Town Bank. And let's just say that you front $300 and they're going to give you a $300 limit to help you get in the door of the house or of this credit card. So in other words, you're going to put $300 guarantee and they're going to give you a $300 credit limit. Now, once again, you're going to go out and spend that money, but never spend more than 10%, especially with a secured credit card, because you want to boost your credit and you want your credit to start moving up very quickly. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is by using a very low amount of it. So a secured card is a great way to go. Now, the great thing about a secured card is if you're just starting off, is this is actually a way for you to be able to grow. And once you have this secured card for 6 to 12 months, many times they'll go ahead and convert this credit card to a full-blown credit card and they'll return the $300 back to you. So that's a great way to help establish or also to rebuild credit. The credit builder loan is a great way to do it too. That can be something as simple as buying a set of pans. I know that you can buy some things on credit. or 12 months same as cash, or other things like that. Those are some great ways to help get started with some of this stuff. But be very careful with this, because many times if you go and get a store card, store cards can also hurt you really, really bad. And I don't know what it is about store cards, but if you have any kind of a glitch with a store card, that tends to ruin your your credit very, 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 very quickly. So just kind of keep that in mind. The authorized user that you see in the bottom left-hand corner, we actually suggest this a lot to people who have not established credit, because it gives them a chance to get a sugar rush off of somebody else's credit. And so what I mean by that is this, is I had one actually about 6-7 weeks ago that just closed. They're making their first payment for February, that they had zero credit. In essence, they'd paid cash for everything, their car, everything. It wasn't, it's not $100,000 car, but they'd paid cash for the car. They'd paid cash for, everything that they had, and they'd never even opened up a credit card, which is actually fairly common in the international community. The situation with them is that they needed credit because they were not able to buy a house, and getting a secured credit card usually takes about 6 to 7 months, no different than applying for a credit builder loan. It takes about 6 to 7 months to establish credit. But becoming an authorized user on somebody else's account is not necessarily like that. And so what that means is that in his case, he was like 26, 27. We added him to mom's account. Mom gave him the benefit of all her good years of wonderful payments on the same credit card, very low balances, and his credit score shot up almost immediately. He went from zero credit score to a sugar rush on Red Bull, and had a 700 credit score almost overnight, because we added him as an authorized user on one of mom's cards. It actually worked very well. A third option, or fourth option, that you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, is using third-party services to report utilities and rent payments. Now, this one sounds counterintuitive, but I would highly encourage you to consider this, because if you're trying to rebuild or establish credit, you can get benefit for making your utility payments on time and your rent payments on time. And all you have to do is just go to, I think it's called Experian Boost, and you can see that the source in the bottom left-hand corner of this graphic is actually Experian. But Experian Boost does allow you to do that. And so you can actually take those pieces, go to Experian, and they will go ahead and record these different items, whether it's your lights or your water or sewer or garbage or whatever else you want to put in there, plus your rent, and they'll add those as credit lines in order to be able to help you get set up. And this will help, this does help eliminate bad credit, but it also helps you build credit. So these are actually some pretty important things when you can get set up with that. Now, just keep in mind that credit inquiries do last on your report for 180 days. And so limit your credit reports, or credit pulls. So if you're going in, like I had a gentleman actually go and buy a car, and he didn't know exactly all the details of what he did, but in essence, he went to, this is called a Toyota, one of the Toyotas downtown. And in essence, what he did is he said, go ahead and shop the rates for me. Well, they sent it to 13 different car places that would actually shop the rates for him and give him the best possible deal. Well, 13 credit pulls later, he went from a 740 to a 640. He lost a ton of credit, because when you end up getting so many credit pulls, in essence, what happens is each one of those actually hits you like a load of bricks. And that happens with credit cards, any type of installment loan, and any type of car loan. If you're getting those credit hits, try to limit the amount, pick wisely before you go down that path, because this is actually a pretty important thing to pay attention to try to limit your credit pulls. Now, if you go to a mortgage, it's a little different. You actually have 14 days window to shop before it counts as multiple pulls. So this is actually pretty important in case you wanted to shop for a mortgage. Mortgage is the only one that has that kind of a setup where you can do 14 days. Now, keep in mind that you can have too many credit cards or too many trade lines. We've actually talked about this as we were kind of leading up to this point. And you can see right here that with too many trade lines, you start losing points, and then you start getting into, waste and abuse. And you can have too many trade lines at any point in time. And this is actually something I've seen. I've seen people who go in to Target and they want that 5% return. And so they go ahead and they open up the card. And then they go to Sephora and they want the $10 off, and so they open up the cart. And they go to Dick's and they want the $20 off, so they open up the cart. And pretty soon they got a wallet full of cards. But the problem is with this wallet full of cards, it's actually doing two things. Number one, you can see right here that it's the initial one, maybe one credit card is actually not necessarily hurting you. But once you start getting into the second and third and fourth, now you're starting to get into a situation where you're getting handcuffs instead of freedom. And you're not necessarily getting any benefits. You're actually, once again, just kind of going and getting some handcuffs. So be careful, because you can set yourself up with this to get yourself into a ton of trouble. Now, this is extremely important to talk about, because when we're looking at credit, we're looking for not necessarily that you have a lot of credit, but that you know how to manage it. And so I'll share with you a real quick situation. In my case, 2013 was probably one of the roughest years of my adult life. I had a few rough years, but that was probably one of the roughest ones. And I lost my job, and unfortunately, I had to cash in my retirement in order to make things work. And it was actually pretty bad. Everything just kind of mushroomed and got out of hand. And we started using our credit cards to try to keep food on the table. I have 4 kids, and that really was a big deal to try to keep them fed. They like to eat for some reason. I don't know what it is. But having said that, we were able to go ahead and get them set up for this. And the problem is that we got into a situation where we had too much that we owed, we couldn't keep up. And so now, I wasn't in mortgages at the time. I finally got into mortgages in 2013, and then I started learning about credit. And so we went through our financial ground zero. And on the other side of the financial ground zero, what I learned is I really don't need more than one credit card. And so it doesn't matter what the interest rate is. My interest rate on it is actually ungodly. But it doesn't matter what interest rate it is, because I'm going to pay it off in full. I'm never going to have more than a 30% balance, and I'm always going to manage it at the highest level. And if you keep that in mind, you're probably not going to set yourself up for failure if you set yourself up like that. Now, the last piece of these right here is the types of credit. And we call them trade lines. You kind of saw that right here on the previous one, the different amount of trade lines. Trade lines refer to the types of credit. We just refer to them as trade lines. That can be a credit card, that can be an installment loan, whether it's an installment loan for pans that you're buying, or maybe it's an installment loan for an RV that you're using, or an installment loan for whatever it is that you're buying that you're making regular monthly payments on. Then you got the mortgages, and within the mortgage categories, you have home equity lines of credit and all these other types. This mix right here tends to be the one that brings everything together and makes it builds out your credit portfolio. Now, you don't need to have a lot of different trade lines, but the ones that you do have, you need to manage well. And so it's extremely important that you reconcile these 5 different factors within credit, and you pull them together to understand, because, kind of like the comedian from Mr. Errol Flynn, sometimes what ends up happening is that we have a problem. It comes in reconciling our gross habits with our net income. And many times our habits are a little bit further outside of where they need to be. And it takes some time to adjust to get back into it. And in 2013, I actually, because of the ground zero that I went through, I had to do a lot of soul searching, a lot of figuring out what I had to do from time. And I didn't figure that I was extremely frugal at that time. But I'm going to make a couple suggestions to help you get through your credit and then get you to the other side of this. Whether you're starting off brand new or you're rebuilding credit, it doesn't matter to me which of these it is. These things will actually help you get past some of this stuff, because what I found in 2013 is that I was way too comfortable with debt. I was very comfortable with that. And I felt like I had to have all these different things that I really didn't need to have. And let me just share a couple. Like, we had cable TV. You know what I found out? We can live without cable. In fact, I still don't have cable. I have Netflix, but I don't have cable. We found out that it was just as much fun to read as it was to watch TV. And what we found out with turning off the TV and not seeing the ads is that there were fewer things that we actually wanted and fewer things that we actually had to have. And so it was one of those things that you can really get into, not even knowing, just by doing what is common in our culture. So finding a way to swim against the culture is pretty important. And I'll share a story of my financial education of my family. My dad has never been extremely financially savvy. He's a minister. He's fantastic at what he does. Very good people person. Very good relationally. But I remember my mom talking to me after I got into mortgages, trying to convince my dad that he needed to get an installment loan to get rid of one of his credit cards because his credit card was at 26% interest. 26% interest. And my dad felt a moral obligation to keep that credit card because he had promised to repay them by signing the paperwork. And my mom's point with him is let's find a means to reduce our interest rate and pay it off by being smart about it. And so sometimes we have to do some things that we're not comfortable with to get us to the point to where we can actually start reconciling our gross habits with our net income. And some of that is just cutting back on certain things and learning a new palette of skills and learning a new palette of flavors that can actually take us places that you simply can't if you're following the stream. And so these are pretty important. Now, fast forward 10 years, I mean, thank you, Jesus, I paid my house off. I demonstrated the ability to understand these things and to build off of them to get them to the point to where some of this is now applied. And now I can grow with these habits. These habits do work. So here's a couple that suggestions that I'm going to give for you is I would highly encourage you to, if you have not done this yet, there's a couple places that you can get the real simple education on finances without really having to spend a whole lot of money, without feeling like you're an idiot, like your family should have known, or any of that stuff. I'm going to tell you, it's more common than people think that people just don't have a very good clue on how to get set up. And this is a great way to help reconcile your gross habits with all of your net income. One of the things I would suggest is, first of all, we have to get a control over your cash flow. And control over your cash flow can help you eliminate not only the anxiety of where your money's going, but also the anxiety of what's happening with your debt. So building like you can see on the left-hand corner, you can see the monthly cash flow plan. And this cash flow plan is really not designed to be restrictive. It's designed to help you understand where your money's going and what truly needs to be a priority and what doesn't need to be a priority. I remember in 2013, we actually, this is total confession time, but it was a very difficult time, and I had not reconciled my plan with my gross habits with my net income, and we were living out in Powhatan on well, and my wellhead went out, and we were out of water for 2 weeks. We didn't have water. We couldn't flush the toilets. We couldn't do anything. It was terrible. My neighbor found out, and he came and bailed me out, and I ended up paying him back. But in essence, it created all sorts of anxiety that I didn't need to have if I'd have had a monthly cash flow plan and I had a means to be able to support it. Now I had just lost my job. I was just trying to make things work. It wasn't a great time. But this would have actually brought some peace to the situation, knowing that I knew what my bills were and how to control it. Because when that hit, it was just like a bomb had gone off in the Parks house. So anyway, so these are some places to kind of help you get set up. Now, as far as once you get your monthly cash flow plan down, there's a bunch of different ways to actually help you get into money, and understand the business aspect of it, because you really need to see your life like a business. You need to see it that you have to make a profit, and that profit has to be invested, and that profit has to build your life, and it has to build you the life that you're looking for, the good life. You can get there. It does work. One of those things was eliminating debt, and we had to go through the process of eliminating debt. Now, there is a plan. I am not smart enough to develop this, so this is not with me, but I refer to the snowball effect. The snowball effect, in essence, what you're doing with the snowball effect is you're going to be starting to pay off your bills as you go along in the process of the way of making this work. And here's how it goes. Let's just start with the lowest bill. And so let's just say I'm going to make this right here, kind of make this a little bit bigger, and then we'll get it out of the way. Let's just say that the first bill that you have, you can focus, you got $500 that you owe on it. And you want to take and you want to pay that one off first, because then you're going to start working your way from the bottom, the one that has the lowest balance, all the way up to the top, the one that has the biggest balance. And the one at the bottom, you know that you can focus $45 a month on that bill. And the minimum payment is 25, but you're going to focus 45. Well, let's just call it 50 to use round numbers. So you're going to use 50 on that first one until you pay it off. Now, you've paid that one off, so you have $50 of disposable income that you have used to pay off a debt. But that's not the only debt you have. You have a few more debts that you have to reconcile. So you have two options at that one point. You have the option to go and spend it and buy some more Little Debbie's or more whatever it is that you want to buy, or go on that vacation or try to find a way to do it. Or two, you have the way of using that $50 and plugging it into the next payment and then starting to build that payment as you're going up. So let's just say that the next payment that you have is another $50. And so you have a minimum payment of $50, but you also have then, so we're going to add $50 to the $50 you're already making. And now you're making a $100 payment on what you were used to be making $50 on. Pretty soon, you've eliminated the first one. Now you're getting ready to eliminate the second one. Now, when you get to the third one is also $50. So we're going to add, once again, you have the choice. Am I going to take that $100 and spend it over here on something else? Or am I going to be smart about it? Am I going to pay off my debts? Well, to take the snowball effect to the first and completely be disciplined on this, you're going to add that 50 to the 100. And now you've got 150 going after the next debt until you pay that one off. And then you go after the next debt until you pay that one off. And then now all of a sudden, let's just say, in my case, let's just say that's $150 later and it's $300. Now you can start investing that money into you. You can start investing that into a savings plan. You can invest it into a 401k, into a Roth, into whatever it is. And let's just say you do that for 1 year. Now all of a sudden you've got some savings, $3,600. And then you take that and you start building off of that. And the following year you get a raise and you're able to keep adding to it. And over 5 years, okay, you've got $18,000 in the bank just by using the money that you had been paying off a debt and putting that into a safe place. Now you're starting to get into the point where if you haven't bought a home, you can start using that money to buy a home, or you can use that money to invest or vacation or other things that you want to do. I would encourage you to think like a business at this point in time. Start creating a vision of where you want to go, visualize who you want to be, get rid of the extra payments, reconcile your needs, maybe consider some of the spending habits you have. Some people have a fetish for shoes, some people have it for technology, some people, have to do whatever. Be very frugal and find your way to get to the point where you can get out of this. Now, I'm not the only one that is providing these solutions. Mine is just something that I'm doing for my database, because I feel like I want to try to give back and make people help people find a way to the next step. But there's a bunch of different people out here who can provide you with some counseling. There's paid for counseling, there's free counseling, there's all sorts of counseling that you can go to in order to be able to get yourself set up for success. But you can also go, and this is kind of what I did, is you can go and you can start grabbing some books. These are some great books that help you right here. The Total Money Makeover is like a classic in this thing. I would highly encourage you to jump in and read that. Jump in and find a way to acclimate that to your life. Psychology of Money, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Think and Grow Rich. There's a bunch of different ones that you can get into that'll actually help you change your mindset about money. It'll change your mindset about how you need to be planning. And it'll change your mindset about what you really should be doing. And this is part of the reason why I'm saying that TV is probably a good idea to let go, because one of the things that you're going to find is that as you start building this, you're going to see, and getting away from TV, you're going to have fewer and fewer things that really grab your attention. Now, that's entirely up to you. These are some solutions that I'm sharing, and hopefully they're helpful for you as you go along. Now, we're going to wrap this up here pretty quickly. I've got about 6-7 minutes and 2 or 3 slides left. That's pretty much it. And so you can see at this slide right here in the final summary, start off by looking at your credit report. Take a look at what you really have. Make sure that you know what it is that you can do. You can get 1 free copy a year on your credit report and 1 free copy to help you understand where your credit is and how to make the best out of it. Avoid too many applications. Number 2, make sure that you're not doing stuff that is getting you into a place where you're going to be adding additional credit and getting yourself into a tough spot. You're going to be so much better off if you can avoid additional credit inquiries. Number three, punctuality is a virtue. Believe it or not, this is extremely important. Paying your credit cards on time, paying your car payments on time, finding a way to make it work. And guess what? If you can't make it work, here's a huge tip for you. If you can't make it work, the creditor just wants to get paid. If you call them and you tell them what the situation is and that you're going to be late with the payment, many times they'll be kind enough because you took the proactive approach. They won't even hit your credit with it. This is actually pretty important. Go try it. If you ever get to that point, make the phone call, say, hey, look, I'm trying to be responsible here. I've learned a few things and I can't make my payment this month. It's not going to be on time. I just wanted to call you, but I am going to focus on it. I'm going to get it to you. I'm going to tell you that it's very possible that they will actually help you out and find a way to help you get this done. Number four, unfortunately, in this world, in at least in the United States, and it's actually going around the globe now, I'm seeing that credit, if you don't have a credit score, you're just not visible to the marketplace. And unfortunately, you're going to have some debt in order to be able to show that you have the ability to manage it. And so this is pretty important for you to go ahead and get that set up, at least get a secured card. We've talked about the four means to be able to set you up with that. Just go ahead and get something. Don't have to use it much. Don't use it more than 10%. That's the highest suggestion. Number five, don't be a credit junkie. Keep your spending limits very low. That's actually extremely important. Number six, going back to number one, if you have a credit report, review it, fix any inaccuracies, make sure that the creditor has to prove beyond reasonable doubt that they are legitimate in their request for this credit. And so, or whatever's on your credit report, fix your inaccuracies, work with it and try to make the most out of it as you go through your credit report. The big and the last one right here, number seven, and this is the mindset piece that I'm pushing on you tonight. The mindset piece is this: think like a bank. Think like a bank. If it was your money, would you lend to you? Think like a bank. If you were buying this, is it worth it? One of the things that I learned early on, especially after graduating from college, is how many hours do I want to work to pay for that? At the time I was making very little money, making $10, $15 an hour. Do I want to work 30 hours to pay for that? Do I want to work 40 hours to pay for that? Think like a bank. Think from the standpoint of that, and that'll actually help you think through how important or how useful this is, especially as you're getting into maybe possibly buying something that you don't necessarily want to. And so start thinking like a bank. Make sure that you have everything set up and that you're growing your mindset. Now, I'm wrapping up, and so I'm just going to share with you why I do this. I do this to actually serve my client group, and I work only by referral. I depend on your referrals as far as the lifeblood of my business, and I do this because I don't do what my counterparts do. All of my counterparts spend all of their time trying to find the next deal, whereas what I'm doing is I'm not doing the cold calls, I'm not buying leads, I'm not paying for partnerships. I choose to do something different because I want to work with people just like you. And I want to help people just like you get on a good foot with credit and get into the house or get to whatever dreams it is that you want. Because I want to devote myself to my clients' needs before, during, and after each transaction. Because I want you, number one, I want to be a trusted advisor who is helping you, but also I want you to refer people comparable to yourself so I can continue doing stuff like this and making and building into people's lives. It's a simple strategy, but it gives me the opportunity to be vested in you when I do that. And that's extremely important to me. Now, as we wrap up, these are the additional financial freedom workshops that I am going to be doing over the next couple months. Some of them are coming up pretty soon. You can see the one at the top right there, January 25th. That's actually today. And then we're going to be doing self-employed borrowers, how to file your taxes to not set yourself up for disaster, buying before selling, low down payment loans, and then also refinancing a practical guide and strategy. So these are other things if maybe you're not necessarily totally interested in being a part of this, but I certainly do want to welcome you if you would like to be a part of this so that you could come out and join us at this event should you want to do that. Okay, and then last but not least, thank you. Thank you to everyone who came out. And I'm going to go ahead and, thank you so much for coming and spending your time with me on a Thursday night for this last hour. I am going to go ahead and try to figure out how to unmute this in case somebody has a question. Otherwise, I mean, you're not obligated to stay. It is awfully nice to go ahead and see everybody tonight and have you here. So I did go ahead and allow everybody to unmute themselves. If they do have a question, you're more than welcome to do that. If you have a very personal question, please don't do it here. We can do it at another time and another location. Okay. Any questions before I let everybody go? All right. 5, 4, 3, 2. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming out. I am so thankful for the opportunity. And by all means, check back in with me if you have any questions or if you'd like me to relate anything specifically to you. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. All right.